There's nothing seriously wrong with pushing back your client's lineup as long as you're not doing anything too crazy. Hey, what do baby? Welcome to the video. I'm Jonty Takaha, and these 4 tips are going to help you do the best fades possible. Alright, let's get into it. Number 1, your fade has to be a gradient. When you look at your fade, it has to appear blurry from a distance. If you can make your fade appear blurry from an up close perspective, icing on the cake. Fades are a transition from short hair to long hair, from dark hair to light hair. What does help create the gradient is if you leave your lineup hair dark. Leaving your lineup hair dark creates contrast, and it helps bring the entire fade and the entire dark to light transition all together. Also adding to that, how your fades blend into the top. How your fade transitions from light to the top of the fade being dark. How the sides of your fade go from a light look all the way up to a dark look towards the top of the fade. With undercuts, super high fades and super light fades don't look that well. Don't look that aesthetic to the human eye. They look medieval. They look like their haircuts done for fun. Whereas fades with the dark gradients look more presentable. Number 2, you need to leave the lineup dark. The main way to do this is to use a longer guard, longer length, closer to the lineup hairs. You need to make sure that you're using your corners and that you're flicking out especially. When you're using your corners, you're more precise because you're cutting less hair at a time, which means you can detail what specific hairs you're cutting. That way you're not cutting too much off as if you were to cut with your blade flat to the head. So use your corners and flick out. Flick your clipper out. Flicking your clipper out's a bit of a safety net. You're making sure that you're not cutting too much off at a time. A lot of the time I use clipper over comb as well. I usually do this if I feel that using a guard or using my corners, I'm gonna cut too much hair off. When using clipper over comb, I can not only help mold the shape and get rid of any hairs sticking out, but I can also keep that dark look without cutting too much hair off. Number 3, you need to make sure that your fade matches the style that you have on top. You can't have a super low fade with a buzz cut on top. The sides are going to appear darker than the top of your hair. It's just going to look weird. It's going to throw the entire haircut off. You need to make sure that the top of the hair is darker than the sides of the hair. That's how you fade. You need to make sure that you leave the top of the sides, the top of the fade, darker as well. It helps create the gradient and the dark look that you're after. Most of the time, I use clipper over comb. I don't have a specific guard length that I cut to, because rather than a length that I'm set on cutting to, I'm set on achieving a look instead. I fade from light to dark. That's how I see fades. I don't do a skin to a number 2 or a skin to a number 3. Towards the top of the fade, and even when you start to blend in the sides to the top of the hair, for most people it'd be maybe a 2 open. Using your corners, you wouldn't use the blade completely flat. You'd use your corners, maybe a 2 open, 3 closed, maybe even a 1.5 guard open. It's gonna vary client to client because not every client has the exact same hair. A number 2 guard on one client is going to appear darker on this client compared to that client over there. That's the beauty of cutting hair. You do one thing on one client and it's not necessarily the same steps on the other. You gotta learn to adapt. You learn to figure it out on the move. I would say definitely use scissor over comb and add it to your arsenal. I use scissor over comb for everything. Lineups, blending in the sides to the top, even blending in the actual fade itself on the sides. I tend to use clipper over comb when I'm fading the midsection part of the fade to the top section part of the fade. So I can keep that dark look. It's the exact same for undercuts, but you're just not blending it to the top. So make sure that the top of the sides of the fade is darker because it creates the transition, it creates that gradient. Number 4, your lineups need to be consistent, structurally correct, not pushed back too far, and symmetrical. When I say consistent, I mean that one side of the fade is as dark to the other side of the fade. Physically, it's impossible to match both sides exactly to each other. Whatever hair texture you have, the hair grows differently on either side of your head. But as barbers, it's our job to make everything look symmetrical and the same. It also means that if you're doing a hook lineup, is that your boxes on either side are the same height and at the same angle. When I say structurally correct, I mean that we've done the right lineup on the right clients. On myself, for example, my lineups, I don't leave the hooks because it makes my head appear a lot bigger than what it actually is. And that's completely based off my head structure, my head shape. I get rid of the hooks with my lineups because of that reason. On bigger bodies, having no hook might help your clients appear thinner, appear slimmer. You just got to play it by ear. A lot of the time, the lineup just might be too dark and lightening it up might fix the entire look. Or you might have to completely change the lineup that you do completely. There's nothing seriously wrong with pushing back your client's lineup as long as you're not doing anything too crazy. A lot of barbers use the term professional pushback. And what they mean by this is that you push back the hairline just enough to where you create a sharp lineup. You're not pushing your client back crazy. I would say personally that sort of depends client to client on how much you want to push them back, or if you just have to sacrifice the sharpness for making them look better. If you push back the side lineup too much, you make their head appear wider. Some clients pull it off, but not everyone does. So that's also what I mean by it varies from client to client. Also, what you see isn't necessarily what your client sees. Your client might like his sides pushed back and he might think it's good, but you might not. At the end of the day, as long as the client leaves happy. A good indicator to see if you've pushed your client back too far is that on the sides and especially on the top of your lineup, on the hairline, when the hair starts to become tougher to shave off, it's a good indicator that maybe you're digging in a bit too much, a bit too far. Lineups need to be symmetrical. Your lineups need to be symmetrical with your client's face shape and your client's face structure. You can't have lines going this way and that way and you look like I have a full moon lineup because it doesn't look right. It's not symmetrical to your client's face. And finally, number 5, you need to make sure that no hair sticks out. If it's the top hair, if it's hair on the sides. There's a few ways you can do this. You can do clipper over comb and scissor over comb. I use clipper over comb to help create the shape of the haircut that I'm going for. If I want my client's overall look to appear more square, if I want it to appear round, usually for the more squarish, aggressive shapes, I use clipper over comb. Not so much with the rounder looks. It's a bit easier to use your scissors for that. You can freehand with the scissors or clippers. I've done this. I think it's very underrated with your straighter hair textures as well. You have a lot of free roaming control. You have to be mindful and you have to be cautious. One wrong move and you're cutting too much hair. You might just have to comb the hair the correct way so it lays down properly. A lot of the time, especially fades, been dragging on, and you're not too sure if the whole haircut's gonna come together. It might take a while to figure out what the haircut is missing, but a lot of the time, you just have to style the hair the right way. Comb the hair in the right direction, this direction, that direction. And then eventually it comes together. Just gotta trust the process. Alright, that was 5 tips to helping you do good fades. Great fades, amazing fades. Hope all this helped. Thanks for watching the video. Subscribe, like, see you in the next one. Peace.